At the Christmas dinner, everyone received lavish gifts except me, the forgotten father. They laughed mockingly, "Oh, yours must have gotten lost," expecting my humiliated silence. But I smiled calmly. "No worries, here's what I got myself." The room froze in shock as I revealed my revenge. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you were listening in the comments. The phone's shrill ring cut through the workshop's evening silence like a blade against steel. I set down my hammer, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my wrist. The caller ID made me freeze. Connor, 3 years. 3 years since he'd called me directly. My calloused fingers hesitated over the screen before I finally answered. "Dad?" His voice sounded different, formal, distant, like he was calling a business associate rather than his father. "Connor?" I kept my tone neutral, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "This is unexpected." A pause stretched between us, filled with the weight of years. "Yeah, well, Madison and I were wondering if you'd like to join us for Christmas dinner this year." Christmas dinner. The invitation hung in the air like smoke from my forge. I hadn't seen him since their wedding, when he'd stood there in that expensive suit, avoiding eye contact as Madison's family whispered about the working-class father who didn't quite fit their country club atmosphere. "At the Parker house," he continued quickly as if reading my thoughts. "Madison's parents are hosting the family gathering." Family gathering. The word stung more than he probably intended. Once I had been family, now I was apparently just invited. "I see." I picked up a cold piece of iron from my workbench, turning it over in my hands. The metal felt honest compared to this conversation. "What time?" 7 o'clock on Christmas Eve. It's been too long, Dad. Too long. As if the distance between us had grown naturally, like grass in an untended field, rather than being carefully cultivated by his new wife and her disapproving parents. I remembered the gradual shift after their engagement, how Connor's visits became shorter, his calls less frequent, until eventually they stopped altogether. The only contact left was a generic birthday card each year, signed Connor and Madison in handwriting I didn't recognize. "I'll be there," I said simply. "Great, that's really great." "Oh, and Dad, it's going to be a nice dinner, so—" He trailed off, but the message was clear. "Don't embarrass me." "I understand." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. After he hung up, I stood in my workshop, surrounded by the tools that had shaped my life. The forge still radiated warmth, and the scent of hot metal lingered in the air. My reflection caught in the darkened window, a 62-year-old man in work clothes, hands stained with honest labor. They had no idea what I'd built in these past 3 years. While Connor pulled away, ashamed of his father's simple profession, I'd quietly transformed my craft into something extraordinary. The workshop that once barely paid the bills now generated more in a month than most people earned in a year. Custom pieces for wealthy collectors, architectural metalwork for exclusive projects, art pieces that sold for thousands. I walked to the corner where a small wrapped box sat on my workbench, a modest gift I'd prepared weeks ago, just in case. Next to it, almost hidden beneath a cloth, were 2 sets of keys, one for my old pickup truck, the other for something Connor would never expect. My phone buzzed with a text from Connor. "Looking forward to seeing you, Dad." Looking forward to seeing me. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had no idea what he was about to see. I touched the hidden keys gently, then covered them again. Tomorrow, I would drive to that Christmas dinner in my old truck, wearing my best clothes that would still mark me as working class in their eyes. I would bring my modest gift and endure their polite condescension, but I would also bring something else, something that would change everything. The workshop suddenly felt too small, too quiet. I walked to the window, staring out at the December darkness. Snow had begun to fall, each flake catching the light from my forge like tiny sparks. 3 years ago, when Connor married Madison, I'd given him my blessing and meant it. I'd wanted him to be happy, even if it meant I'd see less of him. But I hadn't expected to become invisible. I hadn't expected my own son to treat me like a shameful secret. The memory of their wedding reception still burned. Madison's father, James Parker, introducing me to his friends as Connor's father, with that particular emphasis that made it clear I was the unfortunate exception in their perfect family portrait. Victoria Parker, Madison's mother, smiling that cold smile while asking if I'd ever considered retiring from such physical work. They thought they knew me, thought they had me figured out. The simple blacksmith who couldn't possibly understand their sophisticated world of investments and country clubs. I needed to prepare. 2 hours later, I pulled into the Parkers' neighborhood in my old pickup truck. The contrast hit me immediately. Manicured lawns stretched like green carpets even in December, and every driveway held luxury vehicles that cost more than most people's houses. I parked down the street, not wanting to embarrass Connor with my weathered Ford among their pristine European cars. The walk to their front door gave me time to study the mansion rising before me like a monument to wealth. 3 stories of red brick and limestone, with columns that belonged in a museum rather than suburban Denver. My modest gift felt impossibly small in my hands. Victoria Parker answered the door, her smile as artificial as the perfectly arranged flowers flanking the entrance. "Norman, how lovely to see you again." Her eyes swept over my carefully chosen outfit, my best slacks and button-down shirt, clean but clearly not designer. The pause before lovely spoke volumes. "Mrs. Parker?" I extended the gift. "Thank you for having me." She accepted the package with the same expression she might wear handling a suspicious piece of mail. "How thoughtful! James, Norman's here." James Parker emerged from what appeared to be a library, whiskey glass in hand. His handshake was firm but brief, his gaze already dismissing me as he took in my appearance. "Norman, still working with your hands, I see." He gestured at my calloused palms with mild amusement. "Every day," I replied evenly. Connor appeared, looking uncomfortable in an expensive sweater that probably cost more than I used to make in a week. "Dad, you made it. Great. Come in, come in." Madison glided over, her greeting as cool as the December air. "Norman," a single nod, no smile. The interior overwhelmed, crystal chandeliers casting rainbows across marble floors, artwork that belonged in galleries, furniture that whispered of old money and older traditions. Every surface gleamed with the kind of perfection that money could buy and servants could maintain. I followed them into a living room the size of my entire house, trying not to stare at the Christmas tree that towered near floor-to-ceiling windows. Gifts wrapped in expensive paper and silk ribbons created a small mountain beneath its branches. "Drink?" James asked, moving to a bar cart loaded with bottles I couldn't pronounce. "Water's fine." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Of course. Victoria, would you mind?" As Victoria disappeared toward what I assumed was the kitchen, I settled into a chair that probably cost more than my truck. The leather was soft as butter, molding to my body in ways that made me acutely aware of my rough edges. "So," James settled across from me, swirling his whiskey. "How's the blacksmith business? Still making horseshoes?" The question carried just enough condescension to sting without being overtly rude. Connor shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. "Actually, I focus more on custom architectural pieces now. Ironwork for high-end homes and commercial buildings." "How fascinating." Victoria had returned with my water, served in crystal that caught the light like captured starlight. "It must be so satisfying to work with your hands." The way she said satisfying made it sound like a consolation prize for those who couldn't achieve real success. Madison spoke for the first time since her greeting. "Connor tells me you live alone now." The statement hung there, not quite a question, but demanding acknowledgement of my solitary existence. "I do." "That must be difficult." I met her gaze steadily. "I keep busy." Connor cleared his throat. "Dad's workshop is really something. He's got this whole setup." "I'm sure it's very impressive," Victoria interrupted smoothly, her tone suggesting the opposite. The conversation continued like this, each exchange a small cut designed to remind me of my place. They were skilled at it, nothing overtly cruel, just a constant reinforcement of the social hierarchy they believed governed our interactions. As we moved toward the dining room, I caught sight of myself in a hallway mirror. Among their polished sophistication, I looked exactly like what they thought I was, a working man out of his depth, grateful for their charity. If only they knew what waited in my pocket. If only they understood that the keys I carried could purchase their entire world twice over. But not yet. First, I would let them play their game. First, I would endure their performance of superiority. Then, I would show them what real power looked like. Dinner ended with the same artificial politeness that had seasoned every course. Victoria rose with theatrical grace, clapping her hands together like a conductor preparing an orchestra. Well then, time for our Christmas tradition. Everyone to the tree. The migration felt ceremonial. James refilled his whiskey, Madison glided ahead with practiced elegance, and Connor shuffled behind, avoiding my eyes. I followed last, carrying the weight of 3 years' worth of carefully orchestrated exclusion. Their Christmas tree dominated the living room like a monument to excess. 12 feet of perfectly shaped Douglas fir, decorated with ornaments that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Beneath it, a carefully arranged display of gifts wrapped in paper that looked too expensive to tear. Victoria positioned herself beside the tree like a high priestess of holiday tradition. "James, would you hand me that lovely pile there?" One by one, she distributed packages with ceremonial flourish. Each gift announcement felt like a small ceremony of belonging. For Madison, from Mom and Dad. "Connor, this one's from Madison." "James, from Victoria, with love." I watched from my chair, noting the deliberate rhythm. Each family member received multiple packages, their names called with warm affection that emphasized my growing invisibility. The pile shrank. 5 gifts. 3. 1. Then nothing. Victoria surveyed the empty space beneath the tree with exaggerated confusion. "Oh my goodness, that's strange. Norman, I don't see anything with your name on it." Her voice carried just the right amount of theatrical concern, enough to seem innocent, not enough to hide the intention. James chuckled from his chair. "Probably just got mixed up with the others. These things happen." "I'm so sorry," Victoria continued, her smile as genuine as costume jewelry. "We must have missed yours somehow. You know how hectic the holidays can be." Madison said nothing, but the corners of her mouth twitched with barely suppressed satisfaction. Connor finally spoke, his voice weak with embarrassment. "Mom, Dad, maybe we should check upstairs." "Oh, sweetie, I'm sure it just got misplaced. These things happen sometimes." Victoria's tone suggested that forgetting Norman was as natural as seasonal weather patterns. The room fell silent except for the soft crackling of their fireplace. Everyone waited for my reaction, the moment when the working-class father would break down, become emotional, maybe storm out in wounded dignity. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Calm. For 3 years, I'd wondered why Connor had pulled away. I'd questioned my parenting, my choices, my worth as a father, but sitting there, watching their performance of casual cruelty, everything crystallized with perfect clarity. This wasn't about me at all. This was about them, their need to feel superior, their requirement for someone to look down upon, their desperate maintenance of a hierarchy that made them feel secure. The BMW keys felt warm in my pocket. "That's quite all right," I said quietly, my voice carrying none of the hurt they expected. "Mistakes happen." My calm response seemed to unsettle them more than anger would have. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. James stopped swirling his whiskey. Even Madison looked up from examining her new jewelry. "Actually," I continued, rising from my chair with deliberate composure, "I have something to share with all of you, something I brought." Connor looked confused. "Dad, you already gave us your gift." "Not that." I moved toward the window, glancing out at the driveway where my old pickup truck sat among their luxury vehicles. Something else entirely. The room's energy shifted. Where moments before they had controlled the narrative, now uncertainty crept into their expressions. "What do you mean?" Victoria asked, her hostess mask slipping just enough to reveal genuine curiosity beneath. I smiled, not the apologetic smile of a man seeking approval, but something altogether different. "Why don't we step outside? I think you'll find it interesting." The keys in my pocket seemed to pulse with possibility. After 3 years of careful planning, 3 years of building something they couldn't imagine, the moment had finally arrived. "Outside?" James frowned. "Norman, it's freezing out there." "Trust me," I said, already moving toward their front door. "It'll be worth it." Instead of moving toward the door, I reached slowly into my pocket. The room fell silent as I withdrew a set of keys, not the worn brass ones from my pickup truck, but something else entirely. Something that caught the lamplight and gleamed with the unmistakable shine of premium metal. "BMW X7 2025, I said quietly, letting the keys rest in my open palm. "I bought it for Connor." The words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Victoria's theatrical smile froze mid-expression. James's whiskey glass stopped halfway to his lips. "Dad?" Connor's voice cracked slightly. "What are you talking about?" I moved to the window, gesturing toward the street with casual precision. "It's parked across from your neighbor's Mercedes. Alpine white exterior, Tartufo leather interior, executive package. I paused, letting my gaze sweep over their stunned faces. "I thought it would be perfect for Christmas." Madison spoke first, her voice sharp with disbelief. "That's impossible. Those vehicles cost $87,450, I said calmly, plus taxes and dealer fees. I paid cash. The number fell into the room like a stone into still water, sending ripples of shock across every face. Victoria actually stumbled backward, her hand reaching for the mantelpiece for support. "Cash?" James sputtered, his carefully maintained composure cracking. "Norman, that's more than most people make in 2 years. "Yes," I agreed simply. "It is." Connor moved to the window, pressing his face against the glass. In the glow of the streetlights, the BMW sat like a sleeping giant among their collection of luxury vehicles, newer, more expensive, more imposing than anything in their driveway. That's really yours?" he whispered. "It was going to be yours." I emphasized the past tense carefully. "I had the paperwork drawn up, title transfer ready. A Christmas gift from a father to his son." The room's energy shifted dramatically. Where moments before they'd held all the power, now they scrambled to understand this new reality. Victoria's eyes darted between the keys in my hand and the vehicle outside, her mind clearly racing to recalculate everything she thought she knew about me. "How?" Madison demanded, her cold composure finally cracking. "How could you possibly afford something like that?" I smiled, the same quiet smile I'd given them earlier, but now it carried different weight. "My blacksmith business has been more successful than you might imagine. Custom architectural metalwork for high-end developments, art pieces for private collectors. My workshop now handles contracts worth more in a month than most people see in a year." James set down his whiskey with shaking hands. "You mean all this time, when we thought you were just a poor blacksmith embarrassing his son?" I finished gently. "Yes, I know exactly what you thought." The silence stretched like a taut wire. Connor's face, reflected against the window glass, showed a mixture of amazement and growing horror as he realized the magnitude of what had just transpired. "Dad," he started, his voice barely audible. "I didn't know. I had no idea you'd become so successful," I supplied. "Wealthy, capable of giving gifts that make your Christmas presents look like stocking stuffers." Victoria found her voice, though it came out strangled. "Norman, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said, closing my fingers around the keys. "I understood perfectly. You forgot my gift, because you see me as someone unworthy of your family traditions, someone whose presence diminishes your Christmas celebration." The keys disappeared back into my pocket with a soft, metallic whisper. "The BMW will be returned to the dealer tomorrow," I announced, walking toward where I'd left my coat. "I'm sure they'll understand that the intended recipient wasn't as appreciative as I'd hoped." Connor spun from the window, panic flashing across his features. "Dad, wait. Please, don't." But I was already putting on my coat, moving with the same unhurried dignity I'd maintained throughout their performance of superiority. The power dynamic in the room had shifted so completely that the very air felt different, charged with their desperation and my quiet satisfaction. "Thank you for dinner," I said politely, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "I'll see myself out." "Wait." Connor's voice stopped me at the door, raw with something between desperation and amazement. "Dad, please. I need to understand. How did this happen? How did you—" I paused, my hand resting on the brass doorknob that probably cost more than I used to make in a month. The question hung in the air like incense from their expensive candles, and I found myself turning back to face their stricken expressions. "How did I become successful enough to buy an $87,000 vehicle?" I finished quietly. "Is that what you're asking?" James leaned forward, his businessman's instincts finally engaging. "Norman, forgive me, but the numbers don't add up. Traditional blacksmithing can't possibly generate that kind of income." "You're right," I agreed, moving back into the room but remaining standing. Traditional blacksmithing can't, but Wood Iron Works isn't traditional. The name meant nothing to them, of course. Why would it? They'd never bothered to ask about my work beyond their polite, dismissive pleasantries. 3 years ago, I began. Right after Connor's wedding, I was still working out of my garage. Horseshoes, simple repairs, the occasional decorative piece for neighbors. I made enough to get by, nothing more. Victoria shifted uncomfortably, perhaps remembering her cutting remarks about my physical work. The change started with a single phone call. A local architect had seen some ironwork I'd done for a friend's garden gate. He wanted something custom for a $1 million home renovation, flowing metal vines wrapped around a staircase banister. The budget was $15,000. Connor's eyes widened. $15,000? For a banister? For art, I corrected. That's what I learned. I wasn't just a blacksmith anymore. I was creating architectural sculpture. I could see them processing this information, trying to reconcile their image of me with these numbers. That first project led to others. Word spreads quickly in affluent neighborhoods. By the end of 2022, I had a waiting list. Madison spoke for the first time since the BMW revelation, her voice sharp with calculation. How much of a waiting list? 6 months out, I was booking projects worth $20,000 to $50,000 each. The silence that followed was profound. James set his whiskey down with a soft clink that sounded like breaking glass. Last year I expanded, hired 3 skilled craftsmen, moved to a proper workshop facility. Wood Iron Works became the go-to company for custom metalwork across Colorado, then the Southwest. I allowed myself a small smile. This year, we shipped pieces to New York, California, even international clients. International? Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. A tech executive in London wanted gates for his estate. The commission was $200,000. The number fell into the room like a stone into deep water. Connor actually stumbled backward, steadying himself against the window frame where the BMW sat illuminated by streetlights. 200? He started, then stopped, unable to finish. That's just one project, I said gently. We typically handle 8 to 12 major commissions per year, plus smaller residential work. The BMW? I patted my pocket where the keys rested. That represents about 3 weeks of revenue. Victoria sank into her expensive chair as if her legs had given out. 3 weeks? My workshop now employs 8 people. We have a showroom, a website that generates inquiries from across the country, and enough business that I could retire tomorrow if I chose to. James struggled to find his voice. Why didn't Connor know any of this? I looked at my son, standing frozen by the window, his reflection ghost-like against the glass. Because Connor stopped asking about my work, stopped visiting the workshop, stopped calling except for obligatory birthday wishes. The accusation hung in the air, unspoken but understood. They had pushed me away, assumed I was beneath their notice, and in doing so, they'd missed witnessing something remarkable. "Dad," Connor whispered, his voice cracking, "I had no idea. I thought you were still just a poor blacksmith embarrassing his successful son," I supplied softly. "I know what you thought, what you all thought." I moved toward the door again, my coat now feeling less like armor and more like a simple necessity for the cold December night. The BMW was supposed to be my way of bridging that gap, a gesture to show you I'd built something worth respecting, something that proved your old man wasn't the liability you'd decided I was. My hand found the doorknob again. But I realize now that the problem was never about money or success. It was about respect, and that can't be purchased. The silence that followed my words stretched like a held breath. I watched their faces carefully, looking for something, genuine remorse, authentic understanding, a real desire to repair what had been broken between us. Connor was the first to speak, and for a moment, my heart lifted. "Dad, this is incredible. Wood Iron Works, that's really the name?" His voice carried what sounded like admiration. "You must be pulling in serious revenue now." Something cold settled in my chest. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I wish I'd been there." Revenue? "The business does well," I said carefully, studying his expression. "How well?" The question came too quickly, too eagerly. "I mean, if that BMW is only 3 weeks of income..." He did quick mental math, his eyes brightening with each calculation. "That's over $1 million annually, maybe more." There it was. The light in his eyes wasn't wonder at his father's achievements. It was the gleam of opportunity. Victoria sensed the shift and jumped in with suddenly warm enthusiasm. "Norman, this is wonderful. You simply must tell us more. Perhaps we could even invest, help you expand further." "Invest?" I repeated quietly. James leaned forward, his businessman mask firmly in place. "What Victoria means is that we'd love to be part of your success story. Family should support family after all." The irony was suffocating. For 3 years, I'd been invisible to them. Now, suddenly, they wanted to be part of my success story. Connor's excitement grew more obvious. "Dad, think about the possibilities. With our connections, our social network, we could probably double your client base. And obviously, as your son, I'd want to help manage the business side of things." Manage. The word hit me like a physical blow. Madison, who had been calculating silently, finally spoke. "Connor's right. This is a family business now, and families should stick together, especially considering—" She paused, glancing meaningfully at her parents. "Considering what?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Well, inheritance planning, for one thing," Connor said, warming to his theme. "A business this successful needs proper estate structure, and obviously, since I'm your only child, we should probably start discussing transition plans." The BMW keys felt heavy in my pocket. I'd bought that car as a bridge between us, a symbol of reconciliation. But Connor wasn't seeing a gesture of love. He was seeing a down payment on his future. "Transition plans," I repeated, my voice flat. "Nothing immediate," Connor rushed to clarify, apparently hearing something in my tone. "But you're 62, Dad. It's smart planning, and with Madison's father's financial background, we could really optimize things." I looked around the room at their faces, Victoria's suddenly solicitous smile, James's calculating assessment, Madison's cold evaluation, and Connor's bright-eyed enthusiasm for his inheritance. Not one of them was looking at me as a father, a person, a human being they'd hurt. They were looking at me as an opportunity. "I see," I said quietly, and perhaps something in my voice finally registered, because Connor's expression shifted slightly. "Dad, are you okay?" I pulled the BMW keys from my pocket one final time, holding them up so the light caught the metal. "I think I may have misunderstood the purpose of tonight's invitation." "What do you mean?" Connor's voice carried a note of panic. "I thought you invited me because you missed your father, because you wanted to repair our relationship." I closed my fingers around the keys. "But it seems you invited me because you needed money." Dad, that's not fair. Of course I missed you. But finding out about your success, it changes things. It changes possibilities for our whole family." "Our whole family," I repeated, looking at the Parkers. Interesting choice of words. Connor stepped toward me, genuine desperation finally replacing calculation. "Dad, please, don't misunderstand. Yes, I'm excited about your success. Yes, I see opportunities. But that doesn't mean what? That you spent the first hour treating me like an embarrassment? That your wife forgot to include me in gift exchange? That for 3 years, none of you bothered to ask about my life?" The room fell silent except for the soft ticking of their expensive clock. I moved toward the door, my decision crystallizing with each step. The BMW will be returned to the dealer tomorrow. I was foolish to think it could purchase something that should have been freely given. "Dad, wait," Connor's voice cracked. But I was already opening the door, stepping into the cold December night where my old pickup truck waited among their luxury vehicles. Behind me, I could hear desperate voices, the family finally realizing what they'd lost. Not my money. They'd never had that. They'd lost their last chance at having me. The doorbell rang at 10:30 the next morning, its chime echoing through my renovated house like a question mark. I wasn't surprised to see Connor through the security camera I'd installed last year, though he looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and he kept glancing around my property with an expression I couldn't quite read. I opened the door, noting how he stepped back slightly when he saw me. Gone was the confident man from last night's dinner. This Connor looked smaller, uncertain. "Dad?" His voice cracked slightly. Can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting him enter. The last time Connor had been in this house was 3 years ago, before the renovation. Before everything changed. He stopped just inside the foyer, his mouth falling open as he took in the transformed interior. The worn carpet, he remembered, had been replaced with gleaming hardwood floors. The cramped entryway now opened into a spacious living area, with vaulted ceilings and custom metalwork accents I'd designed myself. This is... He turned slowly, taking in the professional lighting, the updated kitchen visible through an archway, the built-in shelving displaying some of my smaller art pieces. "Dad, this is incredible." "Thank you." I kept my voice neutral, watching him process what he was seeing. He moved toward the kitchen like a man in a trance, running his fingers along the granite countertops, staring at the custom cabinet hardware I'd forged by hand. "When did you do all this?" "Over the past 2 years. The kitchen was finished last spring." "Last spring," he repeated quietly. I should have been here to see it." The statement hung between us, heavy with implication. I chose not to respond directly. "Would you like to see the workshop?" His eyes lit up with something that looked like genuine curiosity rather than calculation. "Yes, please." We walked through the side door into what had once been my cramped garage workspace. Connor stopped dead, staring at the transformation that had taken place over 3 years of steady investment and growth. The space had tripled in size, with professional concrete floors and industrial lighting. Modern forges lined one wall, their ventilation systems humming quietly. Tool storage occupied another wall, organized, efficient, everything in its place. In the center, several workstations displayed projects in various stages of completion. "This is a real business," Connor breathed, approaching a half-finished gate that would soon ship to a client in California. This is like a real factory." 8 employees, I said simply. "We ship nationwide, sometimes internationally." He examined the intricate metalwork, his fingers tracing the flowing patterns I'd designed. "This is art, Dad. This is real art." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the pride I'd wanted to share with him years ago. "That piece will sell for $35,000. Connor's head snapped up. $35,000 for one gate? The materials alone cost $4,000. The design took me 3 weeks to perfect. The execution will take another 2 weeks with my team. I moved to another piece, a decorative railing system. This commission is for $60,000. He followed me through the workshop, asking questions that seemed to stem from genuine amazement rather than mercenary interest. For the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to my son rather than a stranger calculating profit margins. "Dad," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion, "I can't believe I missed all this. I can't believe I didn't know you'd built something so incredible." We stepped outside into the winter air. Even my yard had been transformed. Professional landscaping, a stone patio, outdoor lighting that made everything visible despite the overcast December sky. Connor sat heavily on one of the patio chairs, putting his head in his hands. "I've been such an idiot." I remained standing, studying his posture. "Have you? Last night, when I found out about your success, all I could think about was..." He looked up at me, shame written across his features. "All I could think about was what it meant for me, for us, for Madison's family, not what it meant for you." The admission hung in the cold air between us. "I spent all night thinking about this place, about what you must have been doing while I was..." He gestured helplessly. "While I was pretending you didn't exist because I was embarrassed." I pulled out one of the chairs and sat across from him, finally ready to have the conversation we'd been avoiding for 3 years. "Why did you really invite me to dinner, Connor?" Connor's face went pale at my question. He stared at his hands for a long moment, and I could see him wrestling with whether to tell the truth or construct another comfortable lie. "Madison's parents are in trouble," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Financial trouble, bad investments, some business deals that went wrong. They're going to lose everything." The admission hung between us like a confession. "And you thought your rich father might help bail them out," I said, not making it a question. That's not the only reason." Connor looked up at me with desperate eyes. "But yes, we hoped. You hoped I was still the same pushover who'd do anything for his son, even after 3 years of silence." Connor flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Dad, please, I know I screwed up. I know I was wrong to stay away, wrong to be embarrassed by you, wrong to choose Madison's family over Over your own father? I stood up from the patio chair, suddenly needing distance. Do you have any idea what these 3 years have been like for me, Connor? He started to respond, but I held up my hand. Do you know what it's like to spend your birthday alone, year after year, with only a generic card from your son? Do you know what it's like to have Christmas dinner by yourself because your only child is too busy with his real family? My voice grew stronger with each word, 3 years of suppressed pain finally finding its way to the surface. I built all this, I gestured toward my transformed property, while you were pretending I didn't exist. Every success, every milestone, every moment I wanted to share with my son, I celebrated alone. Connor's eyes filled with tears. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was an idiot. I let Madison and her parents get in my head. Make you think what? That you were too good for your working class father? That a blacksmith's son deserved better than his embarrassing old man? Yes, he whispered, the admission torn from him. Yes, that's exactly what I thought. And I was wrong. I was so wrong. I walked to the edge of my patio, looking out at the yard I'd landscaped with my own hands. At your wedding, when James Parker introduced me to his friends, he made sure everyone knew I was just Connor's father, emphasis on just. And you stood there, Connor. You stood there and let him diminish me. I remember, Connor said quietly. You remember, but you did nothing. You were embarrassed by me in front of your new sophisticated family. The man who raised you, who worked 16-hour days to put you through college, who loved you unconditionally. You were ashamed of me. I turned back to face him, and the pain I'd carried for 3 years crystallized into cold clarity. You want to know why I really invited you to see all this? Because I wanted you to understand what you threw away. I wanted you to see what I became while you were busy being too good for your old man. Connor stood up, reaching toward me. Dad, please, give me another chance. Let me prove that I can be better. Let me be the son you deserve. The son I deserve? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. The son I deserved wouldn't have abandoned his father for 3 years. The son I deserved would have been proud of what I built, not calculating how to profit from it. I am proud. Seeing all this, seeing what you've accomplished, now you're proud. Now that you know I'm worth something in dollars and cents. But where were you when I was struggling to build this business? Where were you when I was working alone in that garage, dreaming of the day I could share my success with my son? Connor had no answer for that. You were ashamed of me then, and you're only interested now because you need money. I moved toward the door. That's not love, Connor. That's not even respect. That's just opportunism. Dad, wait, please, don't do this. Don't throw away our relationship over my mistakes. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the son I'd lost long before this conversation. I'm not throwing anything away, Connor. You already did that 3 years ago. I'm just finally accepting it. 2 weeks later, the certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning that felt no different from any other until I opened it. The law firm's letterhead was impressive, Henderson, Walsh, and Associates. But the contents made my coffee grow cold. Notice of intent to pursue legal action regarding business assets and inheritance rights. Connor was suing me. My own son was actually suing me. The legal language was dense, but Connor was claiming he had been an informal business partner in Wood Iron Works, citing conversations and his contributions to the business. The letter mentioned inheritance rights and demanded an accounting of all business assets and income. I stared at the document for a long time, feeling something shift inside me. The hurt father was being pushed aside by something colder, more calculating. Something that had built $1 million business from nothing. My phone rang. Margaret Fernandez, my attorney, didn't waste time with pleasantries. Norman, I've received a copy of the Henderson firm's notice. We need to talk immediately. An hour later, I sat in Margaret's office while she explained Connor's legal position. He's claiming implied partnership based on family discussions. It's a weak claim legally, but expensive to defend. How expensive? Potentially 6 figures in legal fees, plus months of depositions. They're fishing, hoping you'll settle rather than fight. I looked out her office window at downtown Denver. Margaret, Connor doesn't have money for high-end legal representation. Someone else is financing this. She nodded. I took the liberty of running preliminary checks on the Parker family finances. She slid a folder across her desk. What I found was interesting. The documents painted a picture of financial catastrophe. James Parker's real estate business had collapsed 18 months ago. Multiple properties in foreclosure, creditor lawsuits, bankruptcy filings withdrawn and refiled twice. The family's mortgage was 4 months in arrears. "They're not just in trouble," Margaret explained. "They're drowning. Victoria Parker took out a second mortgage 6 months ago. They've been living on credit cards and borrowed time." The timeline became clear. The financial crisis had been building for over a year, reaching critical mass right around Connor's Christmas dinner invitation. "So, the invitation wasn't about reconciliation at all," I said quietly. "It appears to have been a rescue mission," Margaret confirmed, "and when that failed, they moved to Plan B. The scope of their deception was breathtaking. While treating me as their social inferior, they had been accumulating debts that dwarfed their assets. The mansion was mortgaged to the hilt. The luxury cars were leased. The expensive lifestyle was funded entirely by borrowing. They had played wealthy, successful people while frantically searching for someone to bail them out. And I had been their target. The phone rang. Connor's number appeared on the display. "Dad?" His voice was strained, formal. "I assume you've received the legal notice." "I have?" "This doesn't have to go to court. We can work something out. I'm still your son, and you're still my father." The audacity was breathtaking. Even facing legal action, he was trying to manipulate me with family appeals. "Tell me something, Connor," I said, keeping my voice steady. "When exactly did you decide to sue me? Before or after you left my house 2 weeks ago?" Silence. "Because I'm looking at interesting financial documents about your wife's family. Documents that suggest this legal action isn't about inheritance rights at all. It's about desperation. Dad, I don't know what you think you found, but I know about the foreclosure proceedings. I know about James's bankruptcy. I know about the debts, the mortgages, the fact that your lifestyle has been funded by borrowed money." More silence. "So, here's what happened," I continued. "The Parker family realized they were going under. They needed a rescue plan. Someone remembered that Connor's estranged father might have saved up some money over the years. It wasn't like that. When that didn't work, when I turned out to be less of a pushover than expected, you moved to legal extortion. Dad, please, you're wrong about this." "Connor," I cut him off, "all future communication will go through my attorney. And Connor, you picked the wrong target." 3 days after Connor's call, I sat in my home office surrounded by documents that would end his lawsuit before it truly began. Margaret had called it nuclear-level preparation. I called it smart business. The phone rang. Margaret's voice carried satisfaction I rarely heard from attorneys. "Norman, I've reviewed everything you provided. Connor's case isn't just weak, it's frivolous. We can file for sanctions." I looked at the organized stacks of papers on my desk. "Walk me through it." "First, your business incorporation documents. Wood Iron Works was incorporated 2 years ago, with you as sole shareholder. Connor never had any legal standing. I picked up the incorporation papers, dated 18 months ago, long before Connor's Christmas invitation, long before his legal threats. But here's the beautiful part," Margaret continued, "your recorded conversations." The digital recorder sat on my desk like a small monument to foresight. I'd started recording family interactions 2 years ago, after Connor's visits became increasingly focused on money rather than relationship. "The Christmas dinner recording alone destroys his inheritance claims," Margaret said. "His own words prove mercenary intent." I pressed play on the recorder. Connor's voice filled the office. All I could think about was what it meant for me, for us, for Madison's family. The admission was damning. No jury would view this as a son seeking rightful inheritance. This was opportunism, pure and calculated. "What about the business partnership claims?" I asked. "Demolished. Your employment records show you never paid Connor a salary. No business cards with his name, no contracts, no documentation of any contributions." Margaret was right. I'd been methodical about maintaining clear boundaries between family and business. Every employee had contracts. Every partner had documentation. Connor had neither. "There's more," she continued. "I've prepared a countersuit for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The Parker family's financial desperation, combined with Connor's calculated manipulation of the father-son relationship for monetary gain, creates a compelling case." I opened another file folder. Financial records showing the Parker family's deception. Mortgage documents, creditor notices, bankruptcy filings, a family living far beyond their means while plotting to extract money from someone they'd spent 3 years treating as a social embarrassment. The timeline alone tells the story, I said. Connor's relationship with me deteriorated precisely when I started becoming successful. Then, the moment the Parker family faced financial ruin, he suddenly wanted reconciliation. I pulled out my call logs from the past 3 years. Connor's communication had followed a predictable pattern: minimal contact when my business was small, increasing attempts as Wood Iron Works grew, then the Christmas invitation coinciding exactly with the Parker family's financial crisis. What's our timeline for filing the countersuit? I can file tomorrow. Norman, this isn't just about winning. It's about sending a message. Frivolous litigation has consequences. After hanging up, I reviewed the complete picture I'd assembled. Connor had underestimated his father in every possible way. He'd assumed the simple blacksmith would be unprepared for legal warfare. He'd assumed sentiment would overcome strategic thinking. He'd been wrong on both counts. The man who built $1 million business from nothing wasn't the same person who'd raised him. Success had required learning to protect achievements from those who would exploit them, even family. I'd spent the past 2 years preparing for exactly this scenario. Business lawyers had advised me about asset protection. Accountants had structured my finances to withstand legal challenges. I'd documented every interaction with Connor, sensing that our relationship's mercenary turn might eventually require evidence. The recorder on my desk contained hours of conversations. Connor discussing inheritance expectations, Madison making comments about family obligations regarding financial support, even James Parker's hints about investment opportunities that could benefit from my resources. They'd seen me as a mark, a working-class father too sentimental to protect himself from family exploitation. Tomorrow, Margaret would file papers that would not only destroy Connor's lawsuit, but expose the entire Parker family's predatory behavior. The countersuit would seek damages for emotional distress, harassment, and fraud. I looked out my office window at the property I had transformed through 3 years of hard work. Connor had missed all of it: the planning, the building, the careful development of both business and personal security. He'd assumed his father would remain forever vulnerable to manipulation. That had been his biggest mistake. Connor arrived at my office 3 weeks after his legal defeat, looking like a man who'd aged years and months. His expensive clothes hung loose on a frame that had clearly lost weight through stress. "Dad," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "I need to understand what happened, how you were so prepared for everything." I'd been expecting this conversation since Margaret called to inform me that Connor's attorney had withdrawn from the case entirely. "You want to understand how I anticipated your legal strategy?" I asked. "I want to understand everything. It's like you knew exactly what we were going to do before we did it." I leaned back in my chair, studying the son I'd raised for 35 years. "I did know," I said quietly. "Connor, for the past 3 years, I've been conducting an experiment, a character test." His eyes narrowed with confusion. "What kind of test?" "I wanted to know if my son loved me, or if he loved what he thought I might be worth to him financially." Connor's face went pale. "Dad, that's not... of course I love you." "Do you?" "Because the evidence suggests otherwise." I opened my desk drawer and withdrew a thick folder. 3 years ago, when you started pulling away after your marriage, I began documenting our interactions, every phone call, every visit. I spread out timeline charts showing Connor's contact patterns correlated with my business growth. "Notice anything interesting?" Connor stared at the documents, his face growing paler. "Your communication with me increased directly proportional to rumors about my business success. When I was struggling, you rarely called. When Wood Iron Works started growing, suddenly you had more time for your old man. That's not how it was." "Isn't it?" I pulled out another set of documents. "Here are transcripts from recorded conversations, your questions about my retirement plans, Madison's comments about family financial obligations." Connor's hands shook as he looked at the evidence laid out in black and white. "The Christmas dinner invitation wasn't about reconciliation, Connor. It was about desperation. The Parker family needed money, and you'd heard rumors that your embarrassing father might actually have some." "Dad, please! That's not why..." "The BMW was the final test," I continued relentlessly. I offered you something worth nearly $90,000, and your first thought wasn't gratitude. Your first thought was calculating how much more money I must have. I played the recording from Christmas night. Connor's voice filled the office. You must be pulling in serious revenue now. That's over $1 million annually, maybe more. Revenue, Connor, not Dad, I'm so proud of what you've built. Revenue. Connor put his head in his hands. I was excited about your success. You were excited about what my success could do for you. There's a difference. I stood up and walked to the window. Every interaction we've had for 3 years has been recorded and analyzed. And Connor, you failed every single test. Failed? When I offered you the BMW, a loving son would have been concerned about me spending too much. You calculated profit margins. When I showed you my transformed property, you immediately started discussing business partnerships and inheritance planning. The office fell silent except for Connor's labored breathing. The most damning evidence isn't the recordings, Connor. It's the timeline. You abandoned me emotionally when I was still struggling, but came running back the moment you thought I had money. That's not love. That's opportunism. Connor looked up at me with desperate eyes. Dad, I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your son. Doesn't that count for anything? I returned to my desk and closed the folders. You're biologically my son, yes. But the man I raised, the man I hoped you'd become, that person never existed. Please, give me another chance to prove what? That you can pretend to love me when you need money? I shook my head. Connor, I've seen your true character. When you thought you had nothing to gain from me, you treated me like an embarrassment. When you thought you had something to gain, you treated me like an opportunity. I walked to the office door and opened it. This is the last conversation we'll ever have as father and son. You've shown me exactly who you are, and I believe you. Don't contact me again. Connor stood slowly, his face showing complete realization of what he'd lost. Dad, wait. There has to be something. There is something, I said quietly. There's the knowledge that you had a father who loved you unconditionally for 35 years. And you threw it away for money you never actually needed. I watched him walk to his car, knowing I'd never see my son again. But then, I hadn't really had a son for 3 years anyway. Just a stranger who shared my DNA and wanted my bank account. The morning light streamed through Margaret's office windows as I signed the final documents. 3 weeks had passed since Connor's last desperate visit, and the paperwork before me represented something far more meaningful than legal victory. The Sarah Wood Foundation for Working Families, Margaret read from the incorporation papers, dedicated to supporting education and small business development for working-class families. She looked up at me with genuine admiration. Your wife would be proud, Norman. Sarah. My heart still ached when I thought of her, but now the pain carried something else. Purpose. She always believed that success meant nothing if you didn't lift others up with you. The foundation documents specified the transfer of 80% of my business assets and personal wealth. Wood Iron Works would continue operating, providing steady income to fund scholarships, business loans, and support programs for families like the one I'd once been part of. The first grants will go out next month, Margaret continued. 20 full scholarships to trade schools, $50,000 in small business loans for aspiring craftspeople, and emergency funds for families facing financial crisis. I smiled, imagining Sarah's reaction. She'd spent her life working double shifts as a nurse, always finding time to help neighbors, always believing that good people deserved good things. The foundation would be her legacy as much as mine. My phone buzzed. Connor's number appeared on the screen. I answered without hesitation. Hello, Connor. Dad. His voice was barely a whisper. I heard, someone told me about a foundation, using our family name. Your mother's name, I corrected gently. The Sarah Wood Foundation. It seemed appropriate. Silence stretched across the connection, then quietly, how much? Even now, facing complete financial ruin, his first question was about money. The pattern never changed. Most of it, I said simply. The business will continue generating income, but it will fund charitable work rather than inheritance. Most of it? His voice cracked. Dad, that's my inheritance. That's supposed to be my future. I felt no anger, no vindictiveness, just profound sadness for what my son had become. Connor, let me ask you something. In all our conversations over the past 3 years, did you ever once ask about my health, my happiness, whether I was lonely after your mother died? No response. Your inheritance was supposed to be the love between a father and son, the memories we built together, the pride in being part of each other's lives. I paused, watching dust motes dance in Margaret's office sunlight. But you were never interested in that inheritance. Dad, please. The Parker family is losing everything. Madison's parents are going to be homeless. You need, I interrupted softly. That's all it's ever been about, Connor. What you need, what you want, what you can get. Through the phone, I heard him crying. For a moment, my father's heart stirred. Then I remembered 3 years of silence, 3 years of being treated like an embarrassment, the calculation in his eyes when he learned about my success. The foundation will help hundreds of families, Connor. Families with children who dream of education but can't afford it. Families with parents who work with their hands and get looked down upon for it. Families like we used to be before you decided we weren't good enough. But I'm your son. You're Sarah's son, too. And she would be horrified by what you've become. This foundation honors her memory by helping people who deserve help. People who haven't spent years treating their family like an ATM. Margaret handed me another document, the final transfer papers that would make the foundation official. I signed my name with steady hands, feeling lighter with each stroke of the pen. Connor, I want you to understand something. This isn't revenge. This is justice. My money is going to create opportunities for people who will appreciate them. It's going to honor your mother's values instead of enabling your greed. Dad, I can change. I can be better. Please don't do this. You had 3 years to be better. Instead, you got worse. I stood up, walking to Margaret's window. Outside, Denver bustled with working people heading to jobs they took pride in. The foundation launches next week. The first scholarship recipients will be announced next month. There has to be something left. Something for family. There is something for family, Connor. There's the knowledge that Sarah Wood's name will help deserving people for generations. There's the satisfaction that my life's work will mean something beyond personal wealth. I could hear him sobbing openly now. Goodbye, Connor. I hope someday you understand that getting everything you wanted would have been the worst thing that could have happened to you. I ended the call and handed my phone to Margaret. Change my number, please. Forward any legal issues to your office. She nodded, understanding that this was truly the end. Walking out of Margaret's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Complete peace. The morning air tasted cleaner. The sun felt warmer on my face. For the first time since Sarah's death, I wasn't carrying the weight of disappointment and broken relationships. That evening, I sat in my workshop, not working, but simply enjoying the space I'd built. Tomorrow, the first scholarship letters would go out to young people who dreamed of learning trades but couldn't afford school. Next week, a single mother in my old neighborhood would receive an emergency grant to keep her family housed. My phone, the new number, rang once. A potential client wanting to discuss a custom gate for their home. I took the call, discussing design possibilities with genuine enthusiasm. Wood Iron Works would continue creating beautiful things. The difference was that now, every piece sold would fund something beautiful too. Sarah's picture sat on my workbench, her smile as warm as the day I'd married her 40 years ago. We did good, didn't we? I whispered to her image. In the distance, I could hear Connor's voice from our last conversation. That's supposed to be my future. He'd been wrong about that. His future had been built on love, family, and character. But he'd thrown that away for money that was never guaranteed to him. My real legacy wasn't the business or the wealth. It was the foundation that would bear Sarah's name and live her values long after I was gone. It was the young people who would get chances they had earned but couldn't afford. It was the working families who would know that someone understood their struggles and wanted to help. Connor had wanted my money. Instead, my money would go to people who reminded me of the best parts of myself. People who worked hard, loved their families, and never forgot where they came from. Justice, I realized, wasn't about punishment. It was about making sure good things happened to good people. And for the first time in 3 years, I slept peacefully. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.